Hello, Darsh.
Hello, Seema, and hello, ears out there.
Today we are going to cover a fun and some could say mystical topic, Mercury Retrograde, from a spiritual perspective. I would actually like to begin by saying the scientific illusion behind Mercury going retrograde is that every 3 to 4 months it appears that our beloved planet Mercury is moving backwards in relation to Earth. Now, it's not actually physically doing this, it is simply an illusion. If you would like more science behind any planet going retrograde, or what we call retrograde, the hows and the whys, please Google it because learning is fun and I highly recommend it. Now that I've covered that, I would like to ask you, Darshna, what is your knowledge on the spiritual side effects of Mercury retrograde?
Ooh, I've had a long journey with it. So I've been in and out of astrology for years, pretty much most of my life, I think. And over the last decade, maybe more, definitely last decade, been exploring how the planets affect us, and particularly me personally, because I'm on a personal journey as well, and how they impact our day-to-day life. So originally astrology was the superstitious nonsense that, this is going to happen. I'm going to die. The world is going to fall apart. Or, you're going to meet Prince Charming on this day, blah, blah. And it was kind of interesting to have this shift in perspective of understanding the energy of it. And I have to say, hats down to the astrologers that I tune into for all the hard work that they do and the learning that they've done that provides me with the information, but also provides me with the information stroke channeling to share with the wider audience as I do. Mercury, blessed Mercury, what can we say? He is the planet of communication. He is also known as the trickster, the fool. And it's a very interesting time. So generally during a Mercury retrograde, you will always hear people saying, back up your computer. Try not to buy gadgets. Travel is going to go a little bit out of whack. Don't worry about, the phone calls and emails going a bit skew-if. And yes, it does happen. So, you're supposed to try not to sign contracts during a Mercury retrograde if possible. And if you are signing one and it's sort of unavoidable, because, hey, life doesn't stop for Mercury retrograde, right? They say double check, make sure you've dotted your I's and dashed your T's kind of thing. That is per se a Mercury retrograde. Now, actually, interestingly, I've had all of that kind of stuff happen. And I've had, I've lost phones. I've dropped a computer right bang on a Mercury retrograde. It survived, which was amazing, for another 4 years. But, you kind of almost have this slippery fingers with your technology. It's insane. And with the communication part, that's the most important part. Because the essence of Mercury is about communication. And if you think about life and how we operate and relate in the world, it's through our communication, our words. So Mercury retrograde is an amazing time to sit back and listen and hear. With Mercury retrograde at the moment, if you're really listening and paying attention, what's flaring up emotionally? What kind of conversations are you having that are triggering you? Or what are you saying that you can see that is triggering another? And this is a beautiful time to reflect. And just before we got into the studio, I was just sort of sitting back and I was like, I love Mercury retrogrades. I went from actually hating them to actually going, I really embrace a Mercury retrograde because it goes quiet. If you notice, the airwaves go quiet, you get less emails, probably because they go into the black hole of emails. You get less sort of bombardment if you're doing the work and sitting back and reviewing and reflecting rather than being part of Mercury retrograde actively.
I was just thinking that when you were talking about enjoying Mercury retrograde, because I feel the same. I feel like if you aren't so much aware of what's going on or sort of paying attention to these things, it can really sneak up on you, and it can kind of, there can be chaos in your lives. And I'm not saying that it's, because Mercury is in retrograde that you're having a chaotic time. However, it is good to know when these things are happening, because it can just help create another perspective.
Yeah.
And it can just help you basically go, all right, if I feel like looking into this, what does that mean? Or what actions can I take? So I agree with you, sort of the more you sort of look into it and the more you are aligned with it, the easier Mercury retrograde can be. Like, I've definitely found that personally. How about yourself? Have you found that over the years you've slowly gone from having a chaotic time to actually having a fairly peaceful time?
Absolutely. The more I've sat with learning about the energy and learning about how it's impacting me personally, that saying came to mind when you were speaking, forewarned is forearmed. And if you have the knowledge, then you can turn it into wisdom by practicing it. So for me, over the years, what I've been doing is, as I've been gathering information just to share out to the collective in my journey and, with my clients, or whether it's the collective on my blogs, etc., it's also been my personal journey of learning how to ride the waves as they come. And I think that was the most profound thing that I had with astrology was, bowing down to these astrologers who were formulating these words and showing me that there was a light at the end of the tunnel when I was in this deep, dark space. And I think really, the heavens are amazing, because we do need to take stock of our dialogue, communication, the way we communicate, how we communicate, what we say has such a massive impact on our lives and our relationships, that to have this time to just reflect and see and watch, rather than just this doing and creating, it starts to really make you aware that a lot of the stuff that's happening around you is cause and effect directly from you. And I think I've said this before, you are the manifestor, you are the creator, and this has been said in the spiritual world. And that's what this is about. Mercury is saying participate and understand your emotional drive. I'm giving you this 2, 3, 4 week period. Generally what happens with the Mercury retrograde, it goes into shadow, and that's when you start to see the impact of what's coming. Then you have this period of Mercury retrograde, then it starts to seep out back into shadow, so it's not quite clear. Then it starts to propel on. So you have quite a big chunk of time in which to sit and marinate in the energy. And hey, just because I know this stuff, I'm not immune to what happens in a Mercury retrograde. But having the insight gives me a lot more advantage of swimming through it.
Which I think is pretty much a big part of the reason why we're even doing these podcasts, is discussing these things, just to hopefully make life a little bit easier in some way. Now, you mentioned stopping and sort of taking time out, especially that's really endorsed during a Mercury retrograde. It's pretty interesting, the illusion that this, that a planet plays from Earth's perspective, obviously. Just the fact that it's going backwards for a minute, and that's not a bad thing, because it sort of reminds me of that analogy of the slingshot. You pull a slingshot back, and then you let it go and it propels forward. And I think that's probably one of the coolest things. It's like every time a Mercury RX, I'm just going to say RX from now on for short, I'm sick of saying retrograde, a Mercury RX comes around, it's like you could use it as a slingshot moment. You can go backwards and then propel forwards. What would you say are some benefits there of actually doing that, like being willing to go backwards to go forwards?
It's good question, Seema. the benefits, you won't see them for a while. Yeah, they're kind of like these little seeds that get planted and they come into fruition maybe, sometimes years down the road. And I don't want to put you off from doing the work by saying that, but it's basically, it's not to go, oh, okay, if I do this, this is going to happen overnight. Because remember, you're not just dealing with yourself, you're dealing with everything around you. And in a retrograde period, you're not going to lock yourself up. Well, if you're fortunate, you will. But you're not going to lock yourself up in a cave and go, okay, I'm just going to deal with this period. And everybody else is shut out, and then I'm going to come out this new person. You still have to deal with whatever's out there when you come out. And so it's an unknown, it's a bit of an unknown, right? But what happens internally, I think over a period of time of just going, okay, I'm going to breathe into this energy and I'm going to watch it and I'm going to see how it's affecting me and where is it going to affect me particularly at this particular time, is to say, okay, I can watch what's brewing within me. I can see what the triggers are within me. So how can I reduce the charge of that and therefore not have that projecting out into the world so that I'm drawing less of it to me, if that makes sense?
Yes, it does.
Slingshot.
And that, yeah, the slingshot. Okay, so you were talking about less projecting and less triggering. Do you have any steps someone could take in order to do that?
Mm-hmm. Again, it's not a cut and dried method, I guess, in a way, because it's very personal to each one of us as an individual. If I was going to do a generic how-to, I would say that, particularly because we're sitting in Cancer, which is the sign of the emotions, and because it's very linked to home, family, friendships, connections, what I would say is that, on a day-to-day basis as you're interacting, what triggers you, what makes you emotional, whether it's getting angry or whether it's getting sad or whether it's getting frustrated. There's a myriad of emotions we can go through within a second sometimes with one person. So it's kind of like as that happens, that bubble comes up, instead of running with that bubble and running away with that bubble, if you come back to the present and just go to yourself, hey, interesting to feel that. Why am I feeling like that? What is this bringing up for me? And then reflect on the conversation that created it. What is it about that conversation? Often we're working on autopilot because we're triggered generally through auto responses that were sort of set up when we were kids. So when we were children, my classic example is, kids hate being told what to do, right? It's like, oh, Jesus, again, go into your bedroom. But again, and you just want to go F off, right? But you can't because they're in authority. You're not. So what happens generally, and I'm not saying all children will act like this, but generally most of us, we kind of go, okay, talk to the hand, we're out of here. But I'm still standing there nodding, going, yes, of course, Mum, I'll go and do my bedroom right now. Or I'm going to rebel, but I'm still going, talk to the hand, I'm out of here. That response has been programmed. So the next time a figure of authority, what I deem to be authority over me, and it could be a friend who I feel is got higher power than I have. They're a bit more persuasive or they're a bit more aggressive or whatever. The next time they're telling me something to do, I'm present physically, but I've kind of checked out emotionally. And I'm saying, talk to the hand, I'm out of here. But I'll still go through the auto response of continuing to do what I need to do. And so when we start to break down these auto responses, we can be more in the present and we can actually complete that cycle of the past and go, okay, I am now my own authority. I do have a choice. And I can make a decision of whether I want to do my bedroom now or not. You're not the one who's going to tell me how to do this. But at the same time, it gives us, I think what happens again when you review your emotional reflections it gives you the ability to understand how you're responding emotionally to a lot of stuff around you in life. What's yours, what's not yours. One of the interesting thing I think also is that, it's such a broad band that you can't just say, hey, this will happen, so go and do this, because you're talking about emotions and you don't know how each person is going to react in their emotional field. So it's not a cut and dry methodology. The methodology is to stand back, not to run away. And even if you get so caught up in your anger or frustration or whatever it is, take a deep breath, step away. My golden rule in life is step away for at least 24 hours when you've been aggravated. Go offline. Don't try and communicate. Reflect, review, realize. Come back to the table if you need to talk.
I love that. Golden rule. Step away for 24 hours?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be 24 hours. That 24 hours is when you've been triggered massively. But, if it's a short, sharp one, you can go, okay, I just need to pull back.
Okay.
You don't have to respond to every text right there and then or every phone call.
Yeah.
If the phone call is getting a bit aggravated, you can always say, hey, let's talk about this when we're both a little bit more, steady, and we can talk rather than shout.
Yeah.
Because we're not hearing each other.
Yeah. So, okay, that's good. So it's like you get aggravated, you're stepping away, you can even just, like I said, go offline. The usual deep breathing always helps.
Absolutely.
And just allowing yourself at least 24 hours before you decide to get back into the lion's den. So I feel like most people are pretty aware of doing those kinds of things, of, stepping back and staying away. But I feel like during times like Mercury being in retrograde, it's just highlighted. It's just a time where you have to be more aware. So it's like a heightened awareness that more people are possibly going to be triggered. You're possibly going to be more triggered. And it's just a good time to really remember that fairly basic knowledge of don't need to react to everything, and you can just take a step back and allow yourself a chance to respond. And it's just, I find it during this period or whenever, it rolls around, it's just always, you have to just remember it more often.
Yeah, because you're reminded daily, right?
Yeah.
I love, the way you recapped it. I just wanted to touch on one thing that's just coming through very strongly. It was that, people who are leading the 9 to 5 life, they're in the office and they're like, how am I supposed to, The interesting thing was that learning about Mercury retrograde also made me realize that, missing an appointment, having an email go crazy, missing, not having had a response, missing a delivery, a phone call, you've got to realize that there's kind of like this thing called divine timing, and you're not meant to be there, or there was something that you needed to review. What was it in that chain of events, even when you were doing your 9 to 5 work, that you can review? You can still review. Because even at work, we take our stuff with us. We're not leaving it packed up in a suitcase in the car park. When we're going to work and we're just these blank little robots that have got nothing going on in our lives, that's absolute rubbish. So we're taking how we feel into work. And, Mercury retrograde at work is kind of chaotic. I've been there. And it's crazy, but you can actually ride it a lot more smoother if you're doing the same process as if you were doing it for yourself as an individual wanting to work through it. There's no separation whether I'm at work or I'm at home. The same law applies to me wherever I am. So it has to run sort of almost seamlessly through all parts of your life. And I think that's such an important thing to do, because it does, as Seema said, doesn't matter what's rolling around. It's the understanding that what is rolling around is in fact impacting me, whether it's impacting me just a nano bit or if it's a massive, huge explosion. How can I navigate these waters? How can I navigate these waters? And I am in charge. I can be in charge. When I'm not in charge, I can let go and surrender, because I know this is going to be taken care of by a bigger power, higher power, or somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think one of the great things about this particular time is it's great that every few months, 3 to 4 months, this happens. It's actually a good thing, it's not a scary thing at all. I mean, it's that usual fear of the unknown, once you go looking into it. If you're unaware of it, then that's fine, because you'll just be like, why does this keep happening every few months? But then once you look into it, it can be a bit scary. You're like, oh my God, there's so many rules. What is this? This is crazy. And then I feel like once you pass that phase of being, so first it's sort of like, why does this thing keep happening to me every few months? And then you kind of go on the old Google, or someone posts something and you're like, what is this Mercury retrograde business? And then you click that and then you go down that hole, and then you're like, whoa, so many things, don't do this, or your computer's going to blow up, or whatever. I'm kidding. But, well, maybe not kidding, I don't know. But all these things, and then you're sort of like, oh, you kind of just want to you just step back. But then once you go further, you really find out it's so great. Every few months, you get the chance to just stop, reflect, don't make huge, big, life-changing decisions. I mean, you can if you want. No one's going to stop you, but it's also great to be kind of in sync with the planets, because, we are all stardust anyway, so why not be in sync? And it's just great to actually use that time. It's like forced upon you. And it's so much easier to not resist, people. Trust me. Not resisting is the key to life. So, yeah, I find, Mercury RX rolls around and I see it differently now and I feel differently now. And to be honest, I almost don't even notice when things go on the fritz, because a part of me is just like, yeah, kind of saw that coming. Let me just restart my phone or whatever. It's pretty funny, actually. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just really good to have knowledge. And I'm just wondering, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about Mercury retrograde, just for our listeners?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's an interesting topic. You could probably go on for hours, but I also would find that super boring. So I was just thinking like something interesting that maybe isn't on the internet yet. I don't know, that's a big ask. I was just thinking,
That is a big ask.
Yeah, that's a big ask. I was just thinking, is there something you'd like to say that's maybe coming through that you want to talk about?
I think what I'd like to finish off with is that, if you start to dive down the big rabbit hole, or should I say the black hole of all of this, you will find so many different perspectives of different astrologers even, or different, spiritual people sharing about Mercury retrograde. And it is not just Mercury retrograde on its own, because there are various other planets that are impacting us at the same time. Mercury is an important planet. It's an inner planet, according to astrology, because, communication is our day-to-day thing, let's face it. So remember, it's a perspective. But what happens is that you can shift your perspective and your belief around what is happening to you by being informed. As Seema was saying, to have this knowledge is a wonderful thing, because you just deal with it in a different way. And, as you let go of the fear around it, things start to get a little easier to deal with. So each retrograde will start to not be so in your face, I guess. And, the tips of always backing up your computer, double check if you're traveling, double check your emails, double check your contracts, quadruple check your contracts. What don't you have to do in terms of communication, signing papers? And also, if you are doing these things, what is the universe trying to say is unfinished business? If you need to review a contract and it's saying, hey, take your time over this contract, it's saying, are you really sure? Are you really sure this has to happen right now? Is it necessary in your life? So this is where the reflection piece, I think, is so important, because in our day-to-day living, we're so headlong into everything. We don't take time. And we have so many planets right now in retrograde that it is about taking time. It's more about reflection, not so much about doing. So remember, Mercury is the messenger of the gods, but also dives down into the depths of hell. And that piece, I would say, is about the communication, the words we use, the dialogue.
That's a good one. I think that's a very good one to ponder on. I think that would actually make a difference in the world. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about Mercury being the messenger of the gods. I'd just love to know more about that. That's very interesting to me.
So mythology, each planet is connected somehow with a mythology or a mythical figure. And Mercury is known as as I said, the messenger of gods. He can fly right up into the heavens. So in a way, we all have a divine, I don't know how to determine it, angels, you can call it spirit guides, you can call it totems, you can call it whatever you like, but we all have this divine force that kind of speaks to us. Yet we're not all completely tuned into that voice. And that voice is a very quiet voice. It's not one of those rah, rah, rah voices. It's a voice of reason. It's a voice of contemplation. It's our inner voice, and nature, if you've ever sat out in nature and just sat, you hear so much going on, and yet you see very little movement. It's amazing how much you can still hear on the airwaves. So Mercury is that messenger, the subtleties that lie in, and this is the thing about this being a messenger of the gods and the subtleties. It's about reading between the lines. So Mercury can give you that ability to read between the lines if you are able to tune in, not just with words, but silently to ourselves as well, because that's as powerful. What we say to ourselves is so powerful, sometimes more powerful than what another might say to us.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, is to actually really listen to what you're saying to yourself. I mean, that's a really good takeaway, especially because it's not always about other people. A lot of the time, this period, as you're saying, can actually get you to reflect on what you're saying to yourself. That's really good. I think that's a really big thing to think about. And I think, for me, learning about the planets in a way other than they're this beautiful rock flying around the sky, which is super cool. But apart from just looking at it from that perspective and seeing that through, hundreds of years, we've had like philosophers and astrologers and just sort of, I'm thinking, and I'm going to say I'm guessing, that over hundreds of years, they just noticed patterns, we're people that notice patterns. And I think if you're super obsessed and pre-internet, you haven't really got much else to do besides stare at the sky, you probably just got to some point where you were like, wait, why is it every time this particular bright star is in the sky in this particular section of the sky, people lose their minds. And that's how I'm kind of guessing all of this even began, as people just went, I've noticed a pattern. When this happens, this happens. So for me, it's super interesting to look into things beyond just what you see, you know? One of my favorite sayings goes, it is what it is, but it's not what it seems. It's one of my favorites. I really like that one. So I feel like when you look at the planet's influences and the moon and the sun and all these other things, it's really nice just to have a little bit of it. It's almost like having a little bit of a teammate on your side, you know?
Yes.
And, you know, Gabby Bernstein, she has this awesome book. It's called The Universe Has Your Back. It's awesome. What a great title. The Universe Has Your Back. Sometimes I just walk around going, the universe has your back, Seema. Just, you know, it's cool. So I think if you just, you know, want to do a little bit of research and look into these things, it can be really fun. And it can just, I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, I don't really take life that seriously. I'm grateful and I appreciate being here and I love it. And just beyond that, I think it's nice just to have as much help as you can, because let's face it, sometimes being alive is super hard. It's really, really hard. So it's really nice to have, you know, at least believe the universe has your back. It really helps. That's all I have to say. I'll let you wrap it up.
Thank you. Wow, how do you wrap that up? Thanks, Seema. I guess the words from God and the messages of Mercury would be that the universe does have your back, you know, and we place so much importance on our gadgetry, and if it's going a little bit skew-if, maybe we could step back and see if we need to disengage so much from the gadgetry and re-engage with ourselves emotionally. And, you know, as we're talking about messages, Mercury, communications, emotions, feelings, what an amazing time we have on the planet. And these chapters in our life where we can sit, you know, we're kind of made to, like little children, sit still a little while. And, you know, the universe takes us to task, so to speak. So if we're being taken to task, there's a reason, you know, there's a reason for it. And the only reason usually is that we need to learn the lesson and move on. So that's the whole aspect of Mercury retrograde, is what is it trying to teach me? Mm-hmm. And that, I think, from floundering in it and having such a chaotic time with it, it is now, okay, what is the universe showing me? What is it I need to learn? What is it I need to let go and move on from? And the more I work with that, the easier these retrogrades are to navigate. So remember, the universe has your back.
Love it. Great. Thank you so much, Darsh. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Gathering together again this week. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I really appreciate it. We both really appreciate it. Please tune in again next week for more In Deep with Darshna and Seema. So, thanks, guys. Bye.
Ciao.